Welcome to Messy Liberation, the podcast that dives deep into feminism, business, and personal growth. I'm Becky Mollenkamp.
And I'm Taina Brown. Get ready for another messy conversation through the eyes of two intersectional feminist coaches.
Let's get messy. Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm a little sleepy right now, but because of the time difference, but good.
Yes, just for those who, and why would anyone know actually? So for everyone except for you and me,
For those
you're
who
in
don't talk me.
you're in Hawaii as of when we're recording this. We don't know when we'll run it, but lovely.
Yeah.
But it also means you're up bright and early to talk.
Yeah, it's a 6-hour time difference, which I've been on a 6-hour time difference before, just never backwards, always forward. So
yeah. Well, thank you for getting up this early. You didn't have to.
Anything for
and
you,
yet
Becky?
I appreciate it. Well, it's for us. This is for us.
Yeah.
And I think in some ways it should be interesting to see if it feeds into the topic I was thinking we could talk about, which is this last week, as of when we're recording this, I also had exciting things happening, but mine were not Hawaii. Mine was endless amounts of time on the toilet. No, I had the vestibular migraine for a couple of days, followed by my son's norovirus, which actually was more like just horrible stomach cramping mostly, but it was awful. So all told, between the migraine and the norovirus, and I mean, just talk about, isn't that how life goes? When it's one thing, it's all of them.
Yeah.
It was basically like 5 days of me being pretty much bedridden, not really moving and doing much.
Yeah.
And that was really challenging for me, even though I am at my core a lazy son of a gun. Like, I would prefer to just lay around and watch Netflix literally all day, every day if I could. But when I actually am forced to lay down and rest like that, I have all the guilt. All the guilt. I'm not contributing enough. I'm not doing enough in my business. I'm not doing enough in my home. I'm not doing enough for my son, for my husband, for everyone, right? And even though I'm like, I would like to be able to just lay here and enjoy this rest because I actually really love to rest and just, be at leisure. I mean, obviously it wasn't that kind of rest because I was feeling horrible, but I couldn't do it well. And it made me think about the why of it. And I was like, oh, there is so much systemic stuff wrapped up in this that I have clearly not been able to release, despite how much I talk to my clients about it, despite how much I talk about to the world. Yeah, I am wearing a shirt that says, I am a human being, not a human doing, a shirt that I had made, right? This is my shirt. I made it. Because it's like such a part of my philosophy and the way I coach. And yet I found myself, when it was my turn to just be a human being, I was like, better for everybody else, not for me.
Yeah.
So I think we could talk about rest.
Yeah.
Caring for ourselves. Forced rest, but really more about like when you're sick or unable to function as a business owner, like unable to do your work. Like what comes up for you and how do you manage that? And so I'm wondering, because when we talked about this beforehand, I gave a hint of what I wanted to talk about. You also said like this is something you have some experience with.
Yeah. Because, I was, I was in the hospital earlier this year for a lot longer than I wanted to be, for sure. I mean, whoever wants to be in the hospital? So, and as you were just sharing your experience, the one thing that came up for me was like, I am also like lay on the couch, binge Netflix, like kind of person. And there's a sense of control that is challenged when you're sick and you have to lay on the couch and not do anything. And so for me, like the things that I was grappling with when I was forced to rest because it's what my body needed was letting go of that control that I thought I had over my life. And that was hard. That was fucking hard. Like I mean it took me to like a really dark place, because it was just like all of a sudden you realize that any sense of control that you thought you had was an illusion. And it's like the glass, like the veil shatters, and you're just like, whoa, then what am I? It becomes like this existential crisis, because then you're just like, what am I actually doing? Like how do I make sense of this? How do I reconcile the idea of like doing my day-to-day regular life stuff with the idea that I actually have no control sometimes, or really all the time, over what's really happening here. And so I think for me, like what helped me in that situation was like, there's external shit and there's internal shit. And I have control over the internal stuff, right? Like I can manage that and decide and choose, but I don't have control about the external things, right? And I think the thing, and when I want to be clear, because when I say control, like, yes, I'm a control freak. Yes, I am. I know. But what I'm also speaking to is this sense of agency, this sense of power that as women, right, we are used to having to constantly fight for. And then you start your business, and that feels very empowering. That feels like you're really like having this sense of agency that you may not get in an like 9 to 5 office setting or whatever. And then you get sick, and now all of a sudden it's like your agency is stripped away from you again. So yes, control, but also this idea of like having the ability to choose for yourself, the agency and the power, like the self-determination that comes with that.
Well, I want to talk about the existential crisis piece, because I realized the whole time I was having all of these like, I'm going to change my life kind of feelings as I was laying there. I'm like, things are going to change. Yeah. And it's funny because in the moment you think, like, even the rational part of me is like, yeah, all right, we'll see. But honestly, I'm now like 2 days better. So it's not like it's been a long time, but I still feel like something different in the way I am feeling and carrying myself. First of all, I cleaned my desk. I can see my desk because part of it was like, I want less. Like I had this feeling of, because part of it is, I think the reason I got to the first part of my issue, the migraine, because of stress, because I've been doing too much. I'm taking on too much, knowing it, but also like, it's all stuff I want to do and it all sounds great, and not allowing for help. And so that was like this, I had this big feeling related to that of like, rather than, and I'm surprised because a lot of times my brain will go to, you did this to yourself, like punishing myself, shaming myself, feeling bad about it. Instead of that, it was more like, it's time for some change, Becky. And so going to the piece of what can I control? Like I was having all these existential sort of crises around, I need to make a change because I don't want to be here again. And so what can I change? And I guess that's a part of like, what can I change, not just internally, but externally. But I was having both of those feelings of like, okay, externally, what are the changes I want to make in my world and the way I'm running my business, the way I'm showing up, how much I'm saying yes to, what I'm saying yes to. Part of it was like, and just having a clean, clearer slate, right? Because I knew I had so much stuff, and that's adding to the feeling of overwhelm. And then internally too, about what do I need to do to be able to make those changes? Like I need to make some and set better boundaries. I need to do a better job of saying no. I have to do a better job of thinking through priorities. What needs to happen now? What can wait? Because I have a tendency to get excited about things, as you know, and want to do everything right now. And so never. I don't know. I had like, yeah, right. So I was having quite the existential crisis. So it's funny that you're saying that, because I thought, as I was going through it, I'm like, whoa, like, I feel like I'm rethinking my whole life because I'm sick for 4 days, 5 days. And that seems so silly. But also, I think maybe it is what you're talking about. Like, you're just feeling so helpless in a way and without any agency. And it is like, you just don't want to be in that position. And we're all going to be sick again. Like you don't avoid it, but what are the things I can control? Like you're saying.
Yeah. It's that feeling of just like being so powerless. And I think that's what drives that, oh, these are the changes I'm going to make, right? Which, I mean, not that those changes are coming from an awful place, but I think when you're in a place where you feel powerless, like you immediately are like, okay, how can I tap back into my power? Like, how can I tap back into my sense of agency? And I think that speaks to, because one thing you said was like, instead of going to, oh, you brought this on yourself, you went to, okay, what are the changes I need to make so I don't end up here again? Like, that is a map of personal growth, right? And so, because when we get stuck in that point of like, oh, I brought this on myself, blah, blah, whatever, when you're in that mindset, at this point, now you're perpetrating the sense of powerlessness, right? It went from external to internal, and now you are taking away your power. You're stripping away your agency because you've bought into this belief that whatever is happening externally is your fault, that you did have some control over that. And because it went wrong, now you're the one to blame, right? And so I think it's important to realize that it's like, when you are going through something where you feel powerless, right? Whether it's being sick or whether it's being laid off from a job or having some kind of like traumatic experience or something, the best way, and you don't get there automatically. Like everyone has a process that, that they go through mentally and emotionally to get there. But the goal is to get to the point where you're just like, okay, how can I tap back into my power and my agency? Like, what can I do right now? Right? Like, feel the feelings for sure. Like, I'm definitely not saying don't feel your feelings, but getting to that point of just like tapping back into your agency, that's where you're going to start to feel powerful again. And that's where you're going to start to feel in control of what you can actually control again.
Yeah, and it does represent growth for me because I know in the past I've been in that place of like, you did this to yourself sort of thing. I think part of it is the power of the work that we both try to do with our clients and do internally, which is a lot of that, like looking beyond the self and systemically and seeing yourself as a part of this bigger ecosystem in which we all exist, and how so much of what we internalize is truly external, right? And then we take it inside, and so much of it isn't our fault. We can't change all of these external things, as you said earlier, like where you have the control is inside. And so it comes down to, do I want to internalize that stuff that's out there? Am I going to allow them to give it to me, or do I reject that? And that piece has helped, because even with the migraine, as an example, where I could say I did this to myself, because as I said, it was stress. It was me taking a lot of things on. So that could sound easily, without having done any of that other work, to say like, well, this is my fault. It's all me. I'm bad. I'm wrong. I should know better, whatever. But I can also look at that and say, but what made me feel the need to take all of that on? What made me think that, what was making me feel that pressure to do so much? And it's not just because of how I naturally show up in the world or something. There's that component. But, there's also the pressure to make money that's very real in my world right now, right? And so doing more, it's getting caught up in all of these capitalist ideas. If I work harder, if I work more, I'll make more, and then everything's going to be better. So there's that. There's also a lot of this external stuff that's given to me about what success looks like, not just the money piece, but also like the achievement or, doing X number of things, having my name here or there. And so there's that. And then the other piece that I could pinpoint external to me and systemic that might put me in that place of getting to the overwhelm and the migraine is the like not feeling like I have to perform femininity, meaning like we don't say no. It's harder for women to say no. And what does it say about me if I say no to an opportunity, or if I tell someone no? What is that saying about my gratitude, or whether, am I a bitch? Am I not being kind? And so there's like all of these factors that are outside of me that, maybe I've internalized them, we all do. And it's hard to reject them every moment. And that's what it looks like when we take all of that on, is it can lead to our body like shutting down. I mean, it's really, it felt like my body just saying like, whoa, you have taken on way too much of this external conditioning and allowing it to show up. And I'm going to show you, this is what it looks like when you do that. And so for me, like I could say it's all my fault, or I could say, no, it's not. And then the other piece of it is the norovirus. I had no control over it. And I can look at the systems outside of me that make me start to feel guilty for taking rest that I need as a human, right? The part, like the thing that says moms are supposed to be the ones doing X, Y, and Z for their children. My husband was perfectly capable of taking care of our child. He did a fantastic job. And he kept telling, every time I got up, I'm like, I would keep getting up to try and do something. I'd try to pick up a couple of things around the house, and then I'd be back in the bed moaning because my stomach hurt. I'd be trying to find something to do. And he'd be like, what are you doing? I'm like, I know. And I feel this guilt, this overwhelming guilt as I'm laying there hearing you tending to the kid and trying to do all the dishes and the laundry, and and we have a pretty equal division of labor in our home, and I just wasn't able to pull my weight for like 4 days, and I felt massive guilt. And that is all that conditioning that we get as women and moms and parents about how we're supposed to show up. So and I'm sure for you, because again, I'm talking 5 days. You were in the hospital for like weeks, right?
Yeah, I was in the hospital for 32 days total. And I think after about 10 to 15 days, I just like gave up. I was like, there's nothing I can do. I'm just going to lay here and watch Jeopardy every night. And that'll be the one thing that makes me happy.
Good for you.
But and it was rough because I am a former or recovering toxic individualist. And so I am used to being the strong one, being the one that everybody else relies on, being the person that people go to, the one that always has the plan, the one that always, is doing the things. And so while I was hospitalized, we were also moving. And so there was so much shit going on at one time that it felt almost like this like mental and emotional prison for me, because it was like, there's no way out of this at all. And so I really just have to sit here and just like grapple with how I'm feeling and what that means. And the good thing about being hospitalized for 32 days is that you have all the time in the world to think about things. And so it was, I think to this day, I still don't know some of the things that as a family, my wife and I had to rely on other people to do for us. Like there are still details that like, I still don't know everything that happened behind the scenes. And so a part of me is kind of like a part of me wants to know, to be able to then step in and be like, to take control back, but like in that like really toxic way of just like being like, oh my God, thank you so much. Let me send you something, right? Because now I'm the one who's like doing the thing.
Owing, because I owe you basically.
Yes, exactly. And so I'm having this like mental and emotional battle since being discharged, which was back in fucking March, and I'm still like dealing with this. And it's like, I don't owe anybody anything. Like these people stepped in because they care, because they wanted to, not because they were expecting something in return. And so all I have to do is receive that care and appreciate it and say thank you. And so, but I'm that person that's like, oh, you give me something, I'm going to give you something back. Like you give me something, I'm going to give you something back.
Receiving is so hard.
It is.
Receiving is so hard. Do we think, I don't know, we'll never know because neither of us are cishet men, but do we think it's as hard for cishet white men to receive as it is for the rest of us? My inclination is no, because I have noticed with my partner, it doesn't seem like the answer is yes. He seems able to receive pretty easily.
Yeah.
What is it that makes it so hard for us to receive?
Yeah. I think it goes back to what you were saying. Like, we're so conditioned to be the doers, to be the nurturers, the taking care of business people. Like, and so we're not used to being the receivers. Like, and like, honestly, when you ask, is it as hard for men to receive? I was like, considering the amount of blowjob scenes in porn that I've seen, no, I don't think it's hard for men to receive. I think they expect it.
Yes. Because we don't see, I know, well, not that I want to go too far down the porn rabbit hole, because that's a whole other conversation that I think we should have sometime.
Yeah.
But that is because when you see a man giving a woman pleasure in straight porn, it is remarkable. I think that it just seems like that porn intake starts for boys very young, younger than I would like it to, as I think about my child and how soon that may be coming my way. And I worry about that, like thinking how soon that starts for boys. They start to learn that. And if that is what they're being inundated with, you know, from the earliest days of seeing this, they're not being taught to give. They're being taught that that receiving pleasure is their right, like, because it's it's every time this is going to happen. And even forget about blowjobs versus, you know, eating someone up, but like also just orgasms. The male orgasm is guaranteed at the end. This is going to happen, and you can tell the women's orgasms they're just throughout, because they're fake as fuck, right? Yeah, it's fake. And so they're not, so what are we learning then when we start to watch that? Men are learning as boys, young, you know, too young, that their pleasure is guaranteed and is a given, and that they should expect it. And women are learning to pretend that we're happy, to pretend we have pleasure. And so, yeah, I mean, obviously this extends well beyond sex, but I just think it's such an interesting point, because it feels like in all the ways, including sex, we're learning from such an early age that we are not guaranteed pleasure, but we better smile and act like we're happy. And so if that's the case, then it's like, even when you're sick, you got to smile and act like you're still okay. And don't let anybody take care of you.
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, in operating within like the gender binary, right? Like, we're socialized to participate in an extractive society, and men are socialized to be the extractors, and women are socialized to be the ones that are being extracted from, right? So like, women, young girls, and this is speaking exclusively within the gender binary. Obviously, we know that the gender binary it's a construct, it's not real, but women, young girls are taught to give and not receive, right? So we are a resource to be extracted from, and men are the extractors. They are the purveyors of extraction. They are the ones who enjoy the benefit of extraction.
That makes me wonder about being in a same-sex relationship, and if there are differences in those dynamics when you're talking about two women instead of it being a man and a woman, because all of this ingrained stuff that we get about what it means to be in a relationship, or how men and women show up in relationship often. And I can see that dynamic in my relationship, even though he and I are both actively trying to work against those things, it definitely shows up. And so I wonder, with your relationship, do you see it being different than men men learning that they can receive no problem, and women always having to give?
I'm married to a woman. I'm pansexual. She's gay. And so, but there's still a lot of like internalized misogyny that we have to work through. And so I think some of the ways that it is different is that like we're both women, so we've both been socialized to give. We're also both eldest daughters. So we've been socialized to like give exponentially, and just like take care of the family and almost be like a stand-in mom at times, but we're also both Capricorns, so we're also both like highly independent. And so we're always like, we're both always trying to have the last word. We're always trying to be the one that gives the most. Like, it's like this battle, right? So like, there's a lot of social conditioning that we have to kind of disrupt. I think one of the ways that it is different is that because we're both women and we have recognized like this is the water that we swim in, right? I feel like it might take us either less time to like figure out that that's what's happening, or it's easier to then have those conversations when we do figure out that that's what's happening, because we have some shared experience as women in this world and eldest daughters and Capricorns also, with just being like super conditioned to just like give all the time as opposed to receive. Yeah. So, I mean, in a funny way, we do always try to outdo each other with like surprises, like birthdays or anniversary things, and so that makes for some really great gifts. But
both of you struggling to receive them without feeling guilty.
Yeah.
Or now I have to do this.
Exactly. Without having to like outdo the other person the next time around.
I think what it really tells us is that like it really just doesn't matter. None of us can escape this.
Yeah.
Like it is just there for all of us, no matter what. And the thing I will say though is that where that used to be like something that felt bad to me, like, oh my God, I'm never gonna undo all of this. Mm-hmm. And for people who are at the beginning of their own messy liberation process, like that can feel discouraging. It can feel like, what's the point? I'll never be able to undo it. Like if you've been doing this work all this time and you still find it. And I would say like, it doesn't matter how long you do this work, it'll always be there, because even let's pretend there was some mythical world where you could excavate all of it and now say, I am fully cleansed from all the external conditioning. The second you go back out into the world, you're breathing it back in, and there's going to be more of it inside of you that finds its way in. Like, it just is such a part of our life that this is going to be like a lifelong job. And I find that exciting now, but I know it isn't always exciting for people.
Yeah, no, it can feel really heavy, when you're first starting out, and when you wake up for the first time, you're just like, there's so much, like, how do I do this like every single day? And so, but it's also a creative project. And so that to me feels, I wouldn't say fun, but it feels hopeful for sure. And it is an opportunity to create something different, right? To just like wipe the slate clean, metaphorically, right? And just be like, okay, I don't want to function like this. How can I function differently in this situation? And I think as you continue to do that, then you start to build new models of functioning in society that like have ripple effects. And it makes me think about a quote from Angela Davis, where she says, you have to live as if it were possible to change the world. There's that hope piece, right? You have to believe in the possibility that there's a different way to do it. And then you have to live that way every day so that there's the work, right? So it's a combination of hope and effort to figure out a new way to just live in the world.
And we'll keep having these conversations to help just share a little light on how messy this thing is, because we're both, in the path of doing it and still in the mess. And so we'll keep having these conversations. And we're going to end this with taking a question from our community. And it's kind of a long one, but I want to preface it by saying it's a question about being a single mom, and neither of us are single moms. I'm a mom in a fairly equal relationship. You're not a mom. And so neither of us are living this experience. However, we are both the children of single moms. Mm-hmm. So just to preface like what we bring into this conversation. So the question is long, so be ready. Balancing business changes with life as a single mom can be pretty difficult when you're the one filling all of the roles in all aspects of work and life. Do you have advice for the entrepreneur that is at a business point where they need help but can't afford to hire help? For example, I'm confident I could grow my business exponentially if I were able to hire an assistant. However, I need every penny my business makes in my personal life and cannot make the move yet. I tried restructuring the business late last year to potentially require less help, but the change is moving slower than anticipated and the disappointment is real, and I'm trying not to feel discouraged. And even though I'm not a single mom, as a mom and just as a business owner, I understand this. And I think almost any business owner, especially in the beginning or when they're not yet making a lot of money, can understand that. And the piece that, like, what it first brought up for me when I read it was what you mentioned earlier in the episode about toxic individualism. And you said you're recovering. I don't even know if I can say I'm in recovery yet, but I'm in recovery, but I'm like 2 days sober. So like I'm still very much in the process of trying to recover and unhook from that. But it makes me think about collective care and going from toxic individualism to thinking about like interdependence and how we relate as a community and something bigger than just ourselves. Because inside of this, it sounds like this one person who's taking on all the roles and all the responsibility and all the pressure. And it just makes me feel like, could it be an invitation for this person to begin to explore, what does my community look like? Do I have community? Can my business exist beyond just me? Can I think of my business not just as a me thing, but as part of this community, as a collective experience? And what might shift if I do? Who's already in my world that maybe I could bring in if only I allowed myself to? Because almost all of us have some amount of community that we can turn to. It's just that we usually aren't, and we don't feel like we are allowed to. So that's the first thing that I think about when I hear it. But again, I think this may be an area where you have even more thoughts than I do, because you speak really well to interdependence versus independence.
Yeah, and I have Adrienne Marie Brown and Octavia Butler to thank for that. And I think what stood out to me when I read this question is like, where is that sense of urgency coming from? And so if there's like a financial need or like a very real, like pressing need, like obviously that's a different situation. But if the sense of urgency is coming from this idea of where you think your business should be because you see the way other people's businesses are being run or are evolving, or just this idea of just like, I wish I were further along than where I actually am, then I think that is where there's an opportunity to just really get curious about like, why do I feel like what's happening right now is not enough? Because it sounds like you're making the steps, you're doing the things that you need to do to get to the point where you can eventually hire someone and create space in your day to day for something like that. And so going back to that whole idea of toxic capitalism, right? Like, again, I'm not a single mom, I'm just a dog mom. So there could be very real circumstances that this person is navigating. And if so, then that's a completely different conversation. But I think grappling with that hustle culture that like I'm a business owner, so I constantly have to be doing things and I have to just like scale all the time, or yeah, exactly. Like you're
My shirt, we're human beings, not human doings. Right. But it's so easier. It's so much easier said than done.
It is. And this is just another way for you to practice that. And so I have lately been thinking of my business as a garden, like I'm building a garden. And as I tend to that, there's a process for each thing, and there's a timeline for each thing that cannot be rushed. And so are there other life principles that you can apply to your business? And so we have this tendency to compartmentalize. And I think you were speaking to this when you were talking about bringing your community into your business as well. And so we have this tendency to compartmentalize and think that, oh, the Taina who is the business owner is different from the Taina who is a part of her community. And that's not true, because I'm just one person. So wherever I go, my community goes with me. My community is a part of that. whether that's intentional or not. But you get to decide how intentional you want to be with that. And I think that's a great way to create space and to fill a need that this person might be having. Depending on how old your kids are, like if they're older and have the capacity to, and if you have the capacity to as well as a parent, because I know bringing your kids into a project with you can sometimes feel like more work, but bring them in and in little small ways where they can be helpful and be a part of that part of your life as well, because your children are also a part of your community. And I think one thing that I saw as a child growing up and that I see a lot of parents do these days is they keep their kids separate from their personal life. And that's just another facet of compartmentalization that we think we should be doing.
Yeah, I love that. And the other piece of this because I agree on the urgency thing, and that's such capitalist conditioning that we have. And the other piece along with that is that it's the change is moving slower than I anticipated. And it's this idea that can you enjoy the process? Can you enjoy the process of getting there and not just the getting there? So if we are only focused on, I want to bring this help on so that my business can grow X percent. And it's like, I'll be able to enjoy this or be happy when I reach this X level of growth, that it's like you can feel inside of this question. And I see it all the time. I do it to myself all the time. I get so fixated on the end result that I'm not enjoying the process. But the truth is we spend 90%, 99% of our life in process, because as soon as we get to the one goal, the bar moves, right? We extend the finish line out farther, and now we're already into a new goal. Most of the time, we don't even notice when we've reached what was once the destination, because we've already moved it 2 or 3 times since we had originally said, if I just got to this, it would feel better. We don't remember that. I think part of it is taking time to actually notice when you're reaching milestones and allowing some celebration so we can actually have those moments of feeling good, but also learning how can I enjoy the process of getting there? What would make the experience of building your business feel better? And one piece of that internally is releasing the pressure around the destination, because just saying I can just enjoy doing the work and then celebrate little milestones along the way, but I can enjoy doing the work. That will change so much, because that's such a part of that toxic capitalism, is getting focused on the end. And if we're only focused on end result is the only thing that ever matters, and process is always hard and filled with ick, then you're fucked, because you're always going to be the ick. So I think that piece for me is really important. And then the other part is just this part about the disappointment is real. I'm trying not to feel discouraged. I just want to say that the disappointment is real, and that's also okay. So yes, enjoy the process, and it's okay to acknowledge that this is hard. There's grief inside of that, because you had an expectation that's not being met. Unmet expectations are really what grief is about. So allow yourself to feel that too.
I love your phrasing there about the process. The goalposts are constantly moving, and creating a business, owning a business is a creative process. And what we know about creativity is that the process is just as important, if not more important, than the end result. It's all about how you get there.
I loved your gardening metaphor, because that you hinted at earlier, but because it's if you're a gardener, for me, this is not a great metaphor, but I would probably have another project. But for gardeners, you enjoy gardening, even on the days when you're pulling weeds, even on the days when nothing's bloomed yet, right? You enjoy gardening. That's why you do it.
Yeah. I just put in some plants in our garden at home, and it's they're on different levels, and I don't have everything that I want planted there. So it looks really like a mess right now. But I stand back and I'm just damn, I did that. I'm getting to the point to where I want it to be. And I'm enjoying the process of picking out the plants and picking out where to put them. And even though it doesn't look like what I want my finished product to look like, it's getting there. I'm in the middle of it. I'm in the middle of the creative process, and that's enjoyable.
And just think about that garden, because even when you get it to where you want it, there's inevitably a decline, and then it starts to rot and wilt and change and then die off, and then things lie fallow, and then the whole process starts again. And that feels like such a metaphor for business. So as much as I'm not a gardener, I love the metaphor and I'm going to steal it and think about it, because I always talk about the seeds we plant in business. And so that's, think about that too. The person who asked this question is like, even if you're not able to be planting all the seeds you want, you're still planting seeds, and they will pay off. And it might take longer than you want, but they're going to pay off. So I hope that was helpful for that person. It was helpful for me. And as always, I've enjoyed having this conversation with you, and I can't wait to keep having more of them. Thanks for listening to Messy Liberation.
Will you please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen?
I know people say that all the time. And if you're like me, often you just go on to the next podcast. But truly, taking that moment to do that will really help us reach a wider audience.
Thank you so much for your support and for listening today.
Until next time.